Circle is a proud sponsor of the Internal Comms Pro podcast. As your company returns to the office and begins to form the new normal, employee communications are more important than ever. Circle Broadcast was built for internal communications and makes it easier to build a unified experience across email, intranet, and mobile. To find out how Circle Broadcast can help you build your organization's bright internal communications future, visit circle.com/comms.
I'm Sarah Jackson. Welcome to Internal Comms Pro, the podcast. I'm on the road this season to talk to the experts that can help internal communicators face their biggest challenges. The time has come to raise the internal knowing of the value that lies within.
And then we also found that employees are close to 70% more likely to stay after 3 years if they have experienced a well-structured onboarding program. It obviously reduces the ramp-up time to productivity. And if you do it right, if you put that overlay of your company brand on all the different pieces, you can reinforce and strengthen that brand with employees.
Employee onboarding. What does this mean at your company? Is it a presentation, a limited program, or is it an experience? Don't think this falls within your role? Well, this episode helps internal communicators get on board with the idea that enhancing your employee onboarding experience is a great avenue to provide value to your HR department. Lise Harwin, Employee Communications Manager for the Port of Portland, discovered this in her journey, and today she gives us practical tips on how she and her team took the Port of Portland's employee onboarding experience to a whole new level. And the great part, her ideas can be used in this remote employee environment. This and much more on today's show.
My name is Lise Harwin. I work for the Port of Portland in Portland, Oregon. We operate marine ports, run industrial properties, and we also operate some airports, one of which you probably know, the Portland International Airport, America's best airport for 7 years in a row. I am the Employee Communications Manager here.
I saw you speak at the ALI conference, and it was such a wonderful presentation. I felt like so many of the insights would be really valuable for our audience. So I wanted to see if we could sort of recreate your presentation in a conversation style so that we could share all of the insights from that conference with our audience today. Many companies approach onboarding as something that stops. Like when all the paperwork is signed and the employee's first day is complete, it sort of ends there. How do you or how does the Port of Portland define the employee onboarding time period? What are we talking about here?
Well, I'll say when we got this project started, we didn't just, pull numbers out of thin air. We really tried to start with research as, any good communicator would. In this case, we looked at some of the data around recruitment and retention. And some of the data that we found is that traditional first day only onboarding generally has a negligible impact on retention. It's really only about 4%. So that's an interesting fact that doing it only on the first day doesn't really make any difference. We also learned that about 86% of new hires make a decision to leave or stay within the first 6-month period. So that was also an interesting finding that probably whatever we were going to do needed to continue for at least the first 6 months. And then we also found that employees are close to 70% more likely to stay after 3 years if they have experienced a well-structured onboarding program. That's some data from the Department of Labor. And, that really led us to believe that this was a worthwhile investment to build out a structured and integrated onboarding program, because hopefully we'd find that at least 70% of our employees would still be around at least 3 years later.
I love that data tip on, what was going on to help you decide that this was a worthy project. And I want to dive deeper into that backstory. So, what was happening at that time, or to have this opportunity, open up to you for you to take the lead on redesigning the onboarding process?
Well, if you can believe it, it actually started with our careers website. One of the very first projects that I was given when I arrived here at the Port of Portland, which was a little bit more than 5 years ago now, was redo what was a really terrible, dated uh, careers website with very, very little information about our culture and what it was like to work here at the port. And in reality, I discovered as a new hire that the port was a really fascinating place with lots of amazing people and interesting work to do. It was also an organization that had a really great culture, lots of work life balance, lots of perks and benefits to working here. So I arrive, I realize that to me, the port was kind of unexpectedly cool as a place to work. But yet we had this terrible careers website. So my first task was really to start there and update that. So we built out this really wonderful careers website. We talked about the culture, we talked about the perks, we told a lot of employee stories. All the photos are employees. We have a lot of quotes from employees. It's quite, I think, a really powerful statement to attract people to the organization and increase their interest in applying and being part of our team. So we did all of that and we rolled it out. People were really excited about the careers site. And almost instantaneously, I had this moment of pause, which was like, oh my God, we built this great careers website. We told people that the port organizationally is not what they'd expect. That's kind of our tagline. We're not what you'd expect. And I have no idea what happens after they get the job. Um, and that worried me. It worried me that we told them we're not what you'd expect. And then we perhaps, I have no idea, gave them a very expected or mediocre onboarding process, maybe even a disappointing onboarding process. I had no idea. So the creation of this wonderful careers website led me to want to look further into what we were doing as far as onboarding. And what I discovered at that point is that onboarding experiences for employees were really inconsistent. There wasn't that baseline or standard across the board that was happening, that kind of bare minimum. Let's put it that way. Some people were having really wonderful experiences and their bosses were taking them out to lunch and their entire team, signed a card and put flowers on their desk and, gave them a tour and took them out for coffee or whatever it was. And then other people, they might show up and their entire team was in a meeting. So no one was in their work area when they arrived to welcome them. Or maybe their boss was out sick and hadn't put someone on point to show them around. So we really didn't have any idea. There was a wide range of what was happening out there. Um, Even worse, HR wasn't totally aware of what was happening for new employees. Those expectations about what managers should do weren't being really consistently communicated. They certainly weren't being reinforced with managers. There was no consistency. The brand wasn't really showing up. In some cases, there was just no branding at all. And we wanted to create a smooth transition from the careers and hiring process through the onboarding process. We wanted everything to feel like it fit together. And then, people's job specific questions were maybe getting answered, but there wasn't anyone really on point to answer those more cultural questions. Like, what are the opportunities around volunteerism? Or, what's the wellness culture here? Those types of questions might not be answered, or at least there was maybe some inconsistency. So I would say overall, it was driven by a fear that we weren't living up to this idea that we're not what you'd expect, and a push to want to at least build out a program that could ensure a really overall positive welcome experience for every single employee, and avoid some of that inconsistency that was likely out there.
In this next part, Lisa not only gives the true why behind why they made enhancements to their employee onboarding program, but she gives her first practical tip. She actually worked with her HR department to map out every touch point of the employee journey. And you know me, I asked for her actual map. And if you know Lisa, of course, she is sharing it with us. This is such a great framework for you to use, particularly now if you're tasked with onboarding remote employees. We'll share this touchpoint journey with you on internalcommspro.com. Now let's jump back in. I love that. And I would say that I see this so many times with internal communicators, and I'm thinking it might even be back in their roots of kind of this ethics and journalism and broadcast media of, hey, whatever we say from a marketing and internal branding, it's got to actually match the actual experience. And so I love that need for authenticity, drove you to take the next step to the next lily pad from the careers website to the actual experience. Can you give us some highlights of the onboarding program?
Well, let me start by sharing some of what I see as the benefits of a great onboarding program, because this is really the strategic part of it. Like, why would you bother to do this? Why would you invest? And I mean, aside from what I talked about earlier, this idea of reducing turnover and increasing retention, it obviously increases or reduces the ramp up time to productivity, which is really important. Employees know what's going on, know what their role is, know how to get connected in the organization so they can really get started with their job. It helps clarify what their role is within the organization and what expectations are. One of the things I mentioned is the idea of introducing the new hire to an organization's culture and values, which is really important. That's often why people want to stick around, is because they have a good overall employee experience. The program that we created also enhances some social connections. It introduces you to other people that can be kind of your ongoing friend and resource at work. And if you do it right, if you put that overlay of your company brand on all the different pieces, you can reinforce and strengthen that brand with employees. So then, knowing all of that, kind of the why we did it, I can tell you a little bit more from a tactical perspective what we did. The first step was really working with human resources to map out all the touch points in an employee journey that start basically at the point at which they receive a job offer, and then runs obviously through the typical orientation experience and beyond. So we worked with HR to figure out what all of those touch points were. And then we did our due diligence in building out each touch point to make it as impressive as possible. So one of the ones in the very beginning is a welcome email from the manager. It's sent basically at the same time as someone is hired. So they accept the job offer, and obviously they get that kind of formal offer letter, but hand in hand with this, once they accept, they get a note from their manager. It's very personal and welcoming. It kind of tells employees what's coming. And most important, we basically created an email template so every manager could start from the same email with the kind of same key messages of, my door is open, I'm so excited to have you here. So again, we created the baseline, and then we gave every manager the opportunity to further customize this email as they see fit. But if they did nothing, at the very least, an employee would get a nice welcome email from their manager, which was really our goal. We also created what we call a pre-boarding website. This is actually done through the same web service where people are doing their careers application, their job application. So they already have a password and a login. For us, it's NeoGov because we're a government agency. But people could go into that site and start completing their paperwork before their first day, really right from the point of the job offer. There would be a customized checklist of what paperwork they need to complete. They can look it over with their family and have time to make decisions about their benefits that they want to select. They're not put on the spot on the first day. So again, they have kind of ample time to do what they need to do, think through all their decisions in that period between when they have accepted the job and when they actually start on the job. We also created another website that is hidden, but it's not behind a firewall, so they don't have to be an employee to access it. And it really does more of the culture piece. It talks a lot about our perks and benefits. It talks about who our leadership is. It introduces them to a few of their future colleagues, and hopefully drives some of those overall values messaging, so people can see that. And in fact, if anyone listening wants to see it, you can go to portofportland.com/ready, set, go, and you can check it out for yourself, what we've shared with those new hires. One of my favorite pieces actually came from my last job, which was in higher education. If you work in higher ed, you know that all prospective college students get really excited about receiving the fat envelope, letting them know that they got in and that the school is excited to have them and want them to accept. So we wanted to create that same sort of excitement with potential new hires. So we did send them a little packet of fun stuff at their house, again, so they could share their enthusiasm with their family. And it has everything from, just some fun facts and a few goodies, a lanyard. We're a culture of badges. So we wanted to get that over to them. A little bit about our perks and benefits. And it's a way of really building some anticipation for the first day. And then they show up, they arrive, and they get a goodie bag on their first day that's really aligned with our values. We have a real strong culture of sustainability. So there's a durable lunch bag and some durable silverware and that sort of thing in the bag, as well as some other goodies and a t-shirt and all sorts of things that really make that first day kind of fun. And then the last two things are more about building the social connections. We have a regular, what we call a meet and eat lunch. It happens twice a month, and it's basically an ongoing and evolving cohort of new hires who all get together and just bring their lunch and enjoy it together and share some of those new hire experiences. So new hires are automatically invited to that. And then a little bit more long-term, new hires are matched with a peer guide. And that peer guide is outside of their work area, and they're there to really answer the questions about culture and help that new hire transition into the community. The goal is to meet informally for about 6 months to help that new hire understand our business and culture, and be a resource for asking questions. And right at the very beginning, that very first week, the peer guide gets a gift card. They get to take the new person out to coffee and get to know them a little bit better. So that's kind of an overview of the tactical pieces of the onboarding program.
I love it all. I love all the onboarding magic. There's so much pixie dust, and I love the tip that you gave us on how to get started. So this idea of mapping out every touch point. Do you actually have, or did I think you remember you sharing a screenshot of this with our audience? I thought it was so good that you had actually mapped out each individual stop.
We did. And, I'll tell you just a couple of the funny little takeaways that we learned. One of the things that we realized was kind of an unexpected touch point, but it shouldn't have been, is that employees have to get their badge photo taken on their first day of work. And their badge photo will follow them for the entire rest of their career here at the port. Not only are they wearing it, but it shows up in Outlook, and it shows up basically everywhere, and follows them. So what we learned in this process of working with HR and kind of identifying the touch points, they said that sometimes people were really caught off guard when they show up for their very first day of work and find out that they have to have this picture taken. They really hadn't been warned in advance. Perhaps they would have chosen to wear something different or fix their makeup or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, then they were, on the spot getting this photo taken that was going to haunt them forever. So as we worked through this process, when we send out that fat envelope, or what we call what to know for your first day mailer, we put in there a lanyard, and then attached to it a little graphic that says basically, heads up, we're going to be taking your photo on your first day. And it will, continue to be a part of your life here at the port. So just that little heads up in the process made a big difference in terms of new employees feeling like they were ready and they weren't going to be caught off guard, and they had received advance notice and they knew what to expect when they arrived. So again, that experience of kind of mapping out all those touch points and ignoring not even the smallest one, just, hey, you're going to get a photo taken, really allowed us to kind of fine tune the program further. And, I'd also add one of the other things that we learned was, and a place where maybe if I had infinite budget, I would really invest. But as we were giving away swag, as I mentioned, we really wanted it to align with our organizational values. So, as I mentioned, in our case, we have a strong culture around sustainability. So we made sure that everything that went with our swag was stuff that could be reusable and that employees would be able to continue to use on an ongoing basis. We also have a really strong culture around wellness. So one of the things we've kind of played with periodically is the idea of giving every employee a Fitbit, to kind of reinforce that idea of a wellness culture. So I think if you have organizational values that can somehow be represented in the swag that you give, it's just one more way to, again, kind of reinforce your organizational brand in this program.
Circle is a proud member of the Internal Comms Pro Collective and sponsor of the Internal Comms Pro podcast. When a new employee joins your company, it's vital that they get the information they need quickly to get up to speed and begin making an impact. Using Circle Broadcast's suite of internal communications tools, you can be sure that a new employee is set up for success. Find out how you can simplify employee onboarding at circle.com/employees.
Don't you just love Lisa? She gives so many amazing practical tips that we can all do. And the great part is that we can use them now in this new COVID-19 environment. We can mail swag bags or work from home gifts. We can assign an onboarding buddy or a peer guide. We can look at every detail and enhance the experience even in this new landscape. Okay, in this next part, I asked Lisa the question I was too afraid to publicly ask her when we met at the ALI conference. And I finally got my answer. Let's jump back in. I love it. And I love that all your branding was also rooted in that moment of empathy for the employees. I think that's amazing. So one of the things I've been waiting for so long to ask this question, and when you were again at ALI and you said, "Does anyone have any questions?" This was the question that I wanted to ask, but I knew it would open a can of worms. I'm like, I'll just ask her later offline. So this is the one question that I was dying to ask you. So I know publicly I've even called you this. I feel like when I watch you speak, you look like you have it all together. I mean, you are the Martha Stewart, I feel like, of internal communication industry. And so what I wanted to ask, because it was so beautifully done and you had all these different boards and the presentation and the way that you spoke and looked. I mean, I just could not get enough of it. And the audience couldn't either. And so what I wanted to say was, like, how did you get there? Meaning, what steps might not have seen or that you might not have shared did you take to even be in a position to be above the water enough to strategic was this like strategic in your mind? Like, this is a great first low hanging fruit, me as the new hire to position myself with HR? Or was it, this just needs to be done and I'm just going to keep on going because now this careers website, like, how are you so on top of all of this to make this all unfold in the way that I perceive that it did?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think to some extent it is literally all of the things that you said. When I came on board here, I did see low-hanging fruit. I certainly saw it with the career site. And, fortunately, so did our chief of HR, who gave me that as my first assignment. I think going through the process of building out the career site bought me a little goodwill from the HR team where they started to trust that my recommendations were really in the best interest of the organization and what I might suggest, that they could trust me because the career site had been such a success. I think taking the time to get them bought into the process. As I said, when we went through all of those touch points, it opened their eyes too and made them a little bit more excited about the direction that we were heading. In fact, I will say, when HR initially started working with us on onboarding, they were really like, well, all we really need is a name for the onboarding program. And we said, sure, we'll give you a name, but we're also going to give you something far more robust and integrated than that. So, as I kind of alluded to, the name of the program overall is Ready, Set, Go. We were perfectly happy to give them that, but we felt that we would be doing ourselves a disservice by not really thinking through the whole thing from start to finish and giving them the best possible product. That is what we did with the careers site, and we knew that was important going forward. And I think, even now, any project that I deliver for HR or any of the other departments here at the port, folks know that our team is never going to do just the bare minimum, and we're probably not even going to do what they ask us to do. We're going to think bigger, we're going to deliver more, and we're going to work really hard to give them what we think is right. It doesn't mean that they take every single piece of it, but we can at least feel good that we've advocated in the best interest of employees or whomever the audience might be for the particular project. So I think that is hopefully a bit of the answer to that question. But I would also say one other just big picture thought. When I got here, I was asked to do the career site, and everyone needs to start somewhere. But really, the wise thing to do would have been to start from the top with our organizational values. And then once those were really defined and laid out, then we would have thought about, how does our career site represent our organizational values? How does our onboarding program represent our organizational values? How does our recognition program represent our organizational values? How does our intranet and all of our other tactical communications tools reinforce our organizational values? And that is not where things started. It started with the career site, then it went on to the onboarding program, then it went on to the intranet, and then eventually it went on to redoing our organizational core values. And sometimes you just don't have the choice to start where you want to start. Sometimes you have to accept that you're starting where the organization is ready for you to start. But I guess I would just offer that knowing your organizational values and ensuring that every single thing that you do drives those, reinforces those, represents those, is really ultimately the very best place to start, if that is at all possible.
I love that. I think so many internal communicators find themselves in sort of a jungle gym, bit of a mess. And then this is such a helpful tip on how do you sequentially get it organized and where to start, with those values being the North Star, so that the internal communicator can guide the team they're leading through the framework so that it doesn't feel chaotic. So I love that tip so much. So when you think about other things like that, are there any other, and you might not have any, but are there any other failures, I guess you would say, or key learnings when you look back on that experience, like the values one, that you wish you would have known?
Well, one thing aside from that idea of that we started with the website and we didn't think really through the full arc right at that point in time, that it came a little bit later. One of the things that I don't know was a failure, but just maybe something that I didn't anticipate, was that we got this whole program done. We started it, we implemented it, and the reaction from current employees was both, this is awesome, and I wish this had been in existence when I started, and also I would like some of that swag. And I guess I probably should have seen that coming, but it reminded us that we also have to plan for a way. I mean, first of all, you have to draw a line in the sand and just say, I'm sorry, this is for new employees. Hopefully you can, be part of shaping the program going forward, but not everyone gets to participate in this program. That's just part of it. But even though they don't get the swag, there is a way for them to participate in the program, and that's by becoming a peer guide and helping shape the new hire experience for someone else. And we've really tried to find those opportunities for current employees to get engaged with the program. Even if they don't get to experience it as a new hire, they can certainly be a part of it as someone who's a current employee.
That's awesome. So, when you started the project, did you think about like, here's where we are, and this is a baseline? And then did you identify certain metrics? Like, how did you define the metrics to know that this was successful?
Well, one part of it for us was, we were trying to create a baseline of just an overall positive experience for new hires. So part of our, metric is, are these manager emails for sure going out? Are people being assigned peer guides? Basically, is the program actually even happening in a consistent way? Is it being delivered consistently? So that's kind of piece number one. But then going forward, we've implemented quarterly surveys for each kind of cohort of new hires. And we've asked them about all the pieces of the program, what they liked best, um, where they could see improvements. And we've tried to fine tune along the way. I will say, I didn't know exactly how this kind of fat envelope would be received. And it is by far one of the most popular pieces of the program. Folks really like getting something fun in the mail that they can share with their family. So I was excited to see that. People, of course, love having a peer guide and someone to ask questions of. Um, Other pieces of it, it's not that they weren't successful, but there are some things that are assigned to them in that kind of pre boarding paperwork that a few of them wish they had more time to go over with HR in the first day. So we almost cut back too much on first day paperwork. So that was kind of an interesting learning as well. But for the most part, people have been overwhelmingly happy. We ask them, some of the key words, how they feel about the program, and they say they feel valued and welcomed. So those are exactly what we were going for, and it's good to see that kind of consistently coming up in those surveys.
Well, the story, and I felt like the success metrics and everything that you told our group out there was amazing. And I had wondered, were you able to share that same success story internally? Like, 'cause sometimes internal communicators, they do things and then they just go to the next project. Were you able to take the win per se on this?
I think we definitely did. We certainly did so with the career site because we did a pretty visible launch to employees, especially because employees, literally their faces and their quotes were such a big part of the project. To some extent, I mean, like as I said, we shared that we had implemented a new onboarding program, which is why other employees were like, "Why didn't I get that?" So we did to some extent take the win. But you're right. I mean, we were to some extent just on to the next big heavy lift, and we more so, or me personally, have been more interested in sharing this with other communications professionals, especially those who are thinking more about shaping the employee experience versus just the tactical, I'm going to communicate to employees. I've been excited to talk to other communicators and hopefully help them think in that bigger way, in that employee experience way, and encourage them to, I guess, one of the things I was thinking about this morning is this idea that really good ideas don't just stay in one lane. And I know that isn't possible for everyone. But for me, I've found that I read a lot, I consume a lot of information, I talk with a lot of colleagues. And if I hear about a good idea, even if it's a great IT idea or a great HR idea, I really don't hesitate to send it on, not necessarily for action, but for inspiration and discussion, and to hopefully help us keep pushing and getting better. So, I think that we can all learn from each other. We can all share ideas. And my goal is not just taking the win within, our organization, but more sharing the knowledge and the ideas with other communications folks to hopefully help bring them more respect within their organizations.
I wanted to wrap up with just two more questions if you have a moment. So you have such a depth and breadth of different types of experiences, and if you could look back on your younger self, now knowing all the things that you know about internal communications, what would you tell that younger self?
As I was saying before we got started with this, I spent about 15 years doing media relations, and the latter part of that was also a lot of social media too. And I always really enjoyed it. I liked the idea of pitching stories and storytelling, and I liked the idea on social of bringing communities together, especially around whatever the company was, whatever the company's mission was, bringing them together on social. And it was those two things that really pushed me to consider the field of employee comms only about 5 years ago. So this is a relatively new adventure for me. And I think the way that I've taken to this particular discipline and the passion that I've found for it, I would tell my younger self, you should get into employee communications a little faster. Why waste all that time on media relations? But I'd also say that, having the media relations perspective and lens, understanding of crisis communication certainly comes in handy on the employee comms side of things. But I think I've really found what I love and where I think I can help not just my employer, but all employers get better on behalf of their workforce. One of the things that I often tell people, and I kind of say it with a smile, I promise, is just that employee communications is like the most self-serving job ever, in part because I am making my company better for me. I'm an employee too, so anything I do doesn't just benefit my colleagues, but it directly benefits me and my work experience. So how fun to be in an area where you can change culture and make it better for everyone and for yourself. So it's been a great place to be.
I love it. And I love that internal communicators, they have such wonderful power to be this bridge builder between all the different departments, to tell stories of unsung heroes. And it's something that we as the collective want to do. I want to hear about more Lise Harwins. We're starting a campaign called I See a Pro. You'll be seeing this all on social, but in the spirit of talking about people we might not have heard about, is there a certain other internal communicator that has inspired you, or maybe someone in communications? Any unsung hero that you can think about that personally inspired you in your internal comms journey?
Well, I would say, there are folks that you've already talked to on this podcast, so I'll try and give you someone new. But when we were at the ALI conference, I heard for the first time from Christopher Westcott with the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, and he talked a bit about culture change and shaping the employee experience versus just employee communications. And I'm always really excited when I hear from people like that because I think again, even with onboarding, people can say, well, onboarding is the job of human resources. And I would say onboarding is a big part of shaping the employee experience for which I am responsible, right? And, I think hearing from other professionals who think big and think about culture change, lead culture change, is really exciting for me. And, one of the other things that was interesting. I talked to him quite a bit after he presented. He talked a little bit about his background in change management. And that is always of interest to me. Again, I came from a background of media relations. I never came from the world of HR. I certainly never came from the world of organizational development or change management. But it's something that I often think about is, again, if you want to have that broader influence on shaping employee experience, do you need to consider getting some actual learning and education in change management? And it's fascinating, I think, to talk to people who do have that background and expertise and knowledge and are helping communications folks, again, think differently about change and realize that they have more territory that they could explore. If your job, doing a newsletter and managing an intranet doesn't leave you fulfilled, there's more territory that you could certainly get into if you want to.
I love that. Well, great shout out to Christopher Westcott, and I love the nod, to our backstories and the back end experiences of internal communicators because they provide sort of a extra set of superhero powers, if you will, that helps them, in their current role with the ever changing landscape of internal communications. So, well, Lisa, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to really unpack all the magic that you created and helped your HR department create with employee onboarding. Like I said, I consider you the Martha Stewart of internal comms because you not only have it all together, it's beautifully organized, and then you give us great DIY tips where we feel like we could do that and really lead a team. To think about all those touch points to shape the employee experience. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Internal Comms Pro Podcast is produced by Super Awesome Media. Our theme music is Hard Fought Victory by Purple Planet Music. Thank you for listening.